Nobody talks about this anymore. When people talk about Harlem legends, the same names usually come up over and over again. But hidden beneath the stories that made movies and headlines is the story of a young man who accomplished something almost unbelievable. His name was Reginald Douglas, better known as Cisco Kid. Before most teenagers were thinking about driver's licenses, prom dates, or part-time jobs, Cisco was building a fortune that many grown men could only dream about. His rise was so fast, so unexpected, and so mysterious that even today, many people wonder how a kid from Harlem became one of the youngest millionaires the neighborhood had ever seen. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. If you enjoy stories about Harlem history, street legends, untold mysteries, and larger-than-life figures who left their mark on history, you're in the right place. Now let's get into it. Cisco Kid wasn't born into wealth. He wasn't handed success. He didn't come from privilege. He grew up in Harlem during a time when opportunities were limited and survival often depended on how creative and determined you were. From a very young age, Cisco understood something that many adults never learn. Money moves the world. While other kids spent their afternoons playing games, Cisco was always looking for ways to earn. He shined shoes. He ran errands. He sold whatever he could sell. If there was an opportunity to make money, he was interested. Some people are born with a natural talent for sports. Others are born with a talent for music. Cisco seemed to be born with a talent for business. He was ambitious, fearless, and determined. Most importantly, he wasn't afraid to take risks. People who knew him often described him as someone who always thought bigger than everyone around him. While others focused on what they needed today, Cisco focused on what he could build tomorrow. That mindset would eventually separate him from nearly everyone in his generation. The streets of Harlem during that era looked very different from the Harlem people know today. The neighborhood was changing, opportunities were scarce, and young people often found themselves searching for ways to escape poverty. For someone with Cisco's drive and confidence, the environment presented both danger and opportunity. By the time many young people were still trying to figure out who they wanted to become, Cisco had already begun building connections with people much older than himself. He listened carefully. He studied the people around him. He learned how money moved. He learned who held influence. Most importantly, he learned how power worked. That education didn't come from books. It came from experience. And experience became his greatest teacher. What makes Cisco's story so remarkable is how quickly he advanced. Most young hustlers spend years trying to earn respect. They spend years proving themselves. They spend years climbing the ladder. Cisco seemed to skip several steps. According to those familiar with his story, he was already operating at a level that surprised older and more experienced figures around him. While most teenagers were thinking small, Cisco was thinking big, very big. The money began growing rapidly. The respect followed. And soon, people started realizing that this wasn't an ordinary kid. This was someone special. This was someone different. As his reputation grew, so did his lifestyle. The average teenager worries about saving enough money for new clothes or a night out with friends. Cisco was living a completely different reality. Stories about his success spread throughout Harlem. People talked about the cars. They talked about the houses. They talked about the money. Many couldn't believe what they were seeing. Imagine being a teenager and already having access to wealth that many adults spend their entire lives chasing. Imagine being so successful at such a young age that people twice your age looked at you with admiration. That's exactly what made Cisco Kid such a fascinating figure. His success wasn't just unusual, it was almost unheard of. One of the biggest twists in Cisco's story is that his wealth wasn't limited to Harlem. As his fortune grew, he began expanding his vision beyond the neighborhood where he started. He reportedly moved family members away from New York and purchased property in places many people from Harlem only dreamed of visiting. For many people, moving out of the neighborhood represented success. For Cisco, it represented freedom. He understood that real wealth wasn't just about making money. It was about creating options, and options were exactly what he was creating for himself and those around him. But with success comes something that almost every powerful person eventually encounters: jealousy. This is where the story takes a darker turn. People love seeing someone succeed until that success becomes greater than their own. Friends who once celebrated your victories can suddenly become critics. People who once supported you can begin questioning you. Those who once stood beside you can start feeling left behind. Cisco's rapid rise created admiration, but it also created tension. Some people felt inspired by his success. Others felt threatened by it. The faster he rose, the more attention he attracted. And attention is often the price of success. Many people forget that power doesn't just attract opportunities, it attracts enemies. As Cisco's influence grew, so did the number of people watching him. Some wanted to learn from him, some wanted to be him, and some wanted what he had. That's a dangerous combination for anyone, especially someone so young. Yet despite the pressures surrounding him, Cisco continued living life at full speed. His style became legendary. Even decades later, people still talk about the way he dressed. This wasn't the era of social media influencers or designer logos covering every piece of clothing. Back then, style was about presentation. It was about confidence. It was about attention to detail. Your appearance communicated who you were before you ever opened your mouth. Cisco understood that. He carried himself with a level of confidence that stood out wherever he went. Tailored suits, fine fabrics, custom shoes, perfect fits. Everything was intentional. Everything reflected success. People often say clothes don't make the man. That may be true, but presentation absolutely affects perception. Cisco understood the power of image long before personal branding became a popular concept. He knew that appearance could open doors. He knew that confidence could command respect. And he knew that people often judge what they see before they learn who you are. His image became part of his legend. But beneath the flashy lifestyle was a young man carrying enormous pressure. The public saw the cars. They saw the fashion. They saw the success. What they didn't see were the challenges. They didn't see the expectations. They didn't see the risks. And they didn't see the isolation that often comes with standing at the top. That's one of the hidden truths about success. The higher you climb, the fewer people truly understand what you're carrying. Cisco's story wasn't just about making money. It was about navigating a world that demanded constant awareness. Every decision mattered. Every relationship mattered. Every move mattered. For someone barely old enough to be considered an adult, those responsibilities were enormous. Then came the tragedy, the part of the story that still leaves people wondering what could have been. Cisco Kid died at just 21 years old. 21. Think about that for a moment. Most people are just beginning adulthood at 21. Most people are still figuring out who they are. Most people are still discovering what they want from life. Cisco's life ended before he had the chance to fully reinvent himself. And that's what makes his story so heartbreaking. Because many people believe he was already beginning to transition into something different. He had reportedly started pursuing legitimate business ventures. He was exploring opportunities beyond the streets. He appeared to be creating a future that looked very different from his past. The signs were there. The vision was there. The ambition was there. But time ran out. And that's the conflict at the center of his story. Not whether he succeeded, not whether he became wealthy, not whether he made history. The conflict is that we'll never know what he could have become. Would he have become a major businessman? Would he have become a real estate mogul? Would he have become a community leader? Would he have built an empire that lasted for generations? No one knows. And that's what keeps people talking about him decades later. Many people wonder why Cisco Kid's story isn't more widely known. Why aren't there major Hollywood movies about him? Why isn't his story discussed alongside some of the most famous figures from that era? The answer may be simpler than people think. Many famous crime stories become popular because they're filled with courtroom drama, government investigations, informants, and highly publicized legal battles. Those stories leave behind mountains of records. News articles, court transcripts, television coverage. Cisco's story is different. Much of his life exists through memories, stories, and the accounts of people who knew him. His legend survived through word of mouth. And while that may make it harder for filmmakers, it also makes the story more mysterious. Sometimes the stories with the fewest records become the most legendary, because mystery keeps people curious. To this day, older Harlem residents still remember Cisco Kid, not simply because of the money, not simply because of the lifestyle, but because of what he represented. He represented ambition. He represented confidence. He represented possibility. He proved that age doesn't always determine influence. He showed that young people can dream bigger than the limits placed upon them. And even though his life was short, his impact was lasting. That's why his name continues to come up whenever conversations turn to Harlem legends. Some legends live long lives. Others burn brightly for a short period of time. Cisco Kid belongs to the second category. His story is a reminder that success alone doesn't guarantee time. It reminds us that life can change in an instant. It reminds us that potential is one of the most powerful and sometimes most heartbreaking things in the world. Because when people discuss Cisco Kid today, they're not only talking about who he was, they're talking about who he might have become. And sometimes that question becomes more powerful than any answer. Whether you view him as a street legend, a business-minded hustler, or simply a young man who dreamed bigger than most people around him, one thing is undeniable. Cisco Kid left a mark on Harlem history. His rise was extraordinary. His story was unforgettable, and his legacy continues to inspire conversations decades after his passing. That's why legends like Cisco Kid never truly disappear. They live on through the stories people continue to tell. So what do you think? Was Cisco Kid destined for even greater success? Could he have transformed his early accomplishments into a legitimate business empire? Or was his story always destined to become one of Harlem's greatest unanswered mysteries? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss future stories about Harlem legends, street history, and untold stories from the past. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.